I often get some kind of funny looks from people. And I understand why, because you could probably stand on any street corner in Laguna Beach all day long and see very few examples of perfect health walking by, at least on two legs. Because, and clothing, right? Because two legs with feathers and, there's millions of other species on the planet that all function at an incredibly high level of health all the time. It's the natural way. And if you pay attention to nature, you'll see it over and over again. In fact, the only animals on the planet that don't function at that incredibly high level of health, besides us, are the ones that we've taken away from their own natural conditions. We've taken them out of their natural habitat, we've taken them away from their natural diet. We call these animals pets, farm animals, circus animals, laboratory animals. Those are the only animals that consistently die of the same diseases that we do, or with the same diseases that we do. Heart disease and cancer, these things, they're not completely unheard of in nature, but they're pretty unusual. So a fruit fly only has a 30-minute lifespan, but you don't see them dropping dead after 15 minutes of a heart attack. Maybe they make it the whole 30 minutes. So why is it that we're doing such a relatively poor job? And we're doing a relatively poor job. You meet many people tell me that they have longevity in their family, and that usually means in the 90s, right? But physiologists today say our bodies can go 125 to 150 years easily. How many people are doing that? Not so many. In fact, the average person today still lives to 78 only. So we're really not doing so well. And frankly, most people, by the time they hit 78, if they do, they're not doing very well, right? They've already got one foot in the grave. Lots of things aren't working very well, including their brain and their bodies. And so people aren't necessarily living at a very high level of health. And I want to share with you why I think this is, and a little bit about what we can do about it. And again, please understand that there's a limitation, because I sometimes do a full weekend program and we still run out of time in terms of how much I'd like to share. I'm going to tell you just a little bit about my own history. And it's Rita caught herself. I'm not a doctor. I want you all to know right up front. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a nutritionist. I actually have no credentials, except that I've helped more than 4,000 people achieve amazing levels of health over the last 20 years. For some people, that's not enough, right? And that, you have to make your own choice about that. I actually graduated from school 28 years ago, a little late. I should have been 29 or 30 years ago, but I graduated with a degree in finance. And I was working in my field, but 6 months out of school, I found myself very ill. And it only just occurred to me last year how that actually came about, because I realized one day I was going back for my 4th or 5th cup of coffee before lunch. And it hit me. Like, I never wanted to be addicted to anything, and I realized I was addicted to caffeine. So I stopped drinking coffee. That was my last cup of coffee. But what happened was, shortly after that, almost immediately after I stopped drinking coffee, I realized that I was completely exhausted. I had been depending on caffeine to prop me up. And I know I'm not the only one. Right? Other people do this too. So I went to see my doctor, and I had all kinds of things that were actually not working very well. And I was 23 years old, right? I was incredibly fortunate. How so? Well, what happens to most people is they hit 55 or 60 or 65 before everything starts to fall apart. And you know what they do because they're 50 or 55 or 65? They say, this is how it's supposed to be. I'm getting older, right? But I was 23 years old. I wasn't getting older. I mean, not really, not much, right? I thought, there's no way this is okay. There's no way I'm going to be satisfied with this or put up with this situation for the rest of my life, because nothing was working very well. I was later diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome, irritable bowel syndrome, candidiasis, chronic candida, systemic candida problem, sinusitis, and 57 allergies. Okay, so at 23, like nothing was working anymore. And I went to see a doctor because that's all I knew was conventional medicine. So I went to see my allopathic doctor, and the doctor was easily able to diagnose the sinus problem, right? And you all can probably imagine what he offered me for that. Antibiotics, right. And antibiotics, those are great things, right? Stuff really works, doesn't it? I mean, my sinus infection went away for about 20 minutes, right? And then it came back stronger than ever, because what antibiotics do, against bio-life, is they kill the living organisms in your body that you need to be alive. They're actually destroying your immune system. So it went away for a little while, and they came back stronger than ever. The allergies, they could diagnose those. That was easy. I actually declined treatment for the allergies because, I don't know, I guess I like sitting down every once in a while. I didn't think 57 shots in my rear end was going to be very pleasant. But everything else that I was dealing with, they told me didn't exist. Chronic fatigue, 28 years ago, no one diagnosed chronic fatigue. Very few people, maybe out here in Southern California it's different, but I was on the East Coast. It was unheard of. Candida didn't exist. Irritable bowel syndrome, just watch what you eat, I was told. Well, that was fine unless I was eating food. You know, anything other than food was okay, but food was a problem for me. So it took me a while, and I figured out, you know, this guy doesn't maybe know what he's talking about, right? I mean, he wasn't helping me, so I found another doctor. And I got the exact same story. Then I found another doctor, and I got the exact same story. And it finally occurred to me that the reason these 3 MDs couldn't tell me what was going on, it wasn't actually their fault. As it turns out, each of them was suffering from the same condition that made it impossible for them to see what was happening with me. They all had an omniscience complex. It's a terrible disease that afflicts many MDs. It makes it impossible for them to understand what's actually happening, right? Because if you know everything and you don't see it, it must not exist. So at that point, I really didn't know where else to turn. I didn't know about alternatives, and today I can tell you, I'm glad I didn't, because it shortened my learning curve substantially. I didn't go through a whole bunch of other things at the time. Later on, I messed around with some of that stuff. Not anymore. Okay? I hope I'm not stepping on anybody's toes here if you're an alternative practitioner, but you'll understand in a few minutes, or many minutes, what I mean. I didn't know where else to turn, but I thought about nutrition. Now, I'd started studying nutrition 10 years early. At this point, I'm 26, by the time I finally give up on medicine. At 16, I started to study nutrition, which is probably an unusual thing for 16-year-olds to do. But at 14, I'd grown 10 inches. So by the time I was 15, I was 10 inches taller than I was when I turned 14, right? I never put on a pound. I looked like a stick with a nose, right? And you know, my hormones are starting to kick in, and I'm desperately wanting girls to find me attractive, and I look like a stick with a nose. So I started thinking, maybe I need to pay attention to what I'm eating and start working out a little bit. And I started studying nutrition about a year later. So I went back to my nutrition books. And this is back in the days of the 4 food groups, right? So it was a different system than they're offering us today. But according to that system, I was doing everything that conventional nutrition said I should be doing. And I was sicker than anybody I knew. So I started thinking about, well, why was that? Why was nutrition failing me just as much as medicine did? And it occurred to me, finally, that nutrition was failing me because it was based on studying average people. Let me explain why that may not work so well, right? Some of you are old enough to remember the first oven cleaner commercials back in the 60s. Remember these things? Right? These are the first products. You'd open up the oven door, spray this nasty, toxic stuff in there, come back a few hours later and wipe it down. But the commercials were priceless, right? There'd be a woman playing tennis, and there'd be a freeze frame, and she'd say, "I'm cleaning my oven." And then there'd be another woman riding a horse, and there'd be a freeze frame, and she'd say, "I'm cleaning my oven," right? So, see, they could do the same kind of commercials today, but the tennis player would say, I'm causing cancer. And the woman on horseback would say, I'm creating heart disease. Because just like they weren't actively cleaning the oven when they were doing these other things, they're not consciously, actively creating these diseases. But the diseases are being created every single day as they make the choices they make. And, you know, that may seem obvious, but it's amazing how often people seem to not get that. So 15 years ago, I got a call from a buddy of mine, and he said, Lauren, I've got some terrible news. I said, Joe, what happened? He said, my brother Johnny was 35. He said, my brother Johnny just died of colon cancer at the age of 35. The next thing he said was so absurd, I didn't know what to do. And he said, and he was perfectly healthy. So this may come as a surprise to some of you, but you do not go to bed perfectly healthy and wake up dead with cancer the next day. It doesn't quite work that way, right? What happens is these conditions take 10 or 20 or 30 years to develop. So if we're studying what happens when we put food into the body of the average person, we're looking at walking disease factories. How much is that going to tell us? How's that going to help understand what belongs in a healthy body? For me, I realized it's not telling me anything, okay? And that's why it didn't have the answers for me. So I always felt very close to nature. Even today, I would say nature is perfect. It's perfect until we come along and screw it up, right? Nature is perfect. And so I started thinking, well, what if I could figure out what was natural for my body? I mean, my thinking goes like this. Every other species on the planet, the brown pelicans, you know, the gray squirrels, the red foxes, the bald eagles, all of them have a species-specific diet. There's a natural diet for each species. I thought maybe if I could figure out what's natural to put in my body, maybe I'll get my health back. So I took a hard look at what I was eating at the time, and this was a painful thing because, as I said, this was all just a few years after college, and I was living on that traditional all-American post-college diet of pizza and beer, which, it's got the grains and the vegetables, and it seemed like a pretty balanced thing. But I realized probably not doing me all that much good. And a lot of the things I was consuming were probably not doing me so much good. So I started thinking about what was natural. And the first thing that occurred to me was, if it came in a package, right, if it was processed in any way, it wasn't natural to my body. Seems obvious now. The second thing that occurred to me, and some of you may not get this yet, but with even just a little bit of study in comparative physiology, if you compare the physiology of a human body, the human digestive tract, with the digestive physiology of any animal that eats other animals, it's completely different. It's completely different. So it became obvious to me right away we were not designed to eat animals. So I've been sick for 3 years, sicker than anybody I knew, and I made these changes to my diet. Just these changes at the time. I gave up all processed foods, I gave up all animal products, and within 6 months, I felt and looked better than I had in many, many years. And I was in the real estate business, but what started happening was amazing because people would walk up to me and say, "You look incredible. What did you do? Could you help my brother or my grandmother or my daughter?" And before I knew it, I was spending more time coaching other people on their health than I was running my business, which is not a very good strategy for paying the bills, right? It only took me a few years to figure this out. Eventually I said, you know what? This is much more satisfying helping people get well than helping people make money, which is what I was really trying to do in my other business. I was helping developers finance their projects, and that was fine, but there were other people that could help them do that. So I wound up switching in full time and getting into coaching people. Around the same time, I came across a book, and the book was called Rational Fasting. Anyone familiar with this book? Dr. Arnold Ehret wrote it. Arnold, not Dr. Arnold Ehret wrote this book back around 1920, if I remember correctly, somewhere in that era. And so by the time I read the book, he was long dead, right? And Sebastian, this may be hard. I don't know if anyone's told you this or not, but because we're talking 28 years ago, right? Get this, there was no internet. Google didn't exist. Can you imagine this?
What did you do?
I don't know. It's hard to imagine. But I didn't realize there were people out there that knew anything about this stuff, because how do you find, you don't go to fasting and look in the yellow pages, right? You don't find anything. I was on my own. So I'm reading this book, and this guy's talking about going weeks without food, just drinking water. Right? It sounded pretty radical. It sounds pretty radical to some of you too. And I thought, this is a little crazy. But at the same time, it actually resonated with me to a certain extent. And in fact, I've had a little bit of experience with fasting. I grew up, I'm Jewish, but just on my parents' side. And so I've been fasting one day a year ever since I was a little kid, and I thought, no problem. I'm going to try for 2 days, right? So I parked myself close to the refrigerator, just in case. Because, most people seem to think if they skip lunch, they'll probably die, right? You're going to drive to San Diego. You better plan out your meals real carefully, because it's a 2-hour drive. Anything could happen, right? What if you get a flat tire and can't eat for an extra half hour? So, like everybody else, I really didn't know, could I survive 2 days without, I made 1 day, but could I do 2 days? Well, I survived 2 days, and then I survived 4 days, and 8 days, and I kept trying this. And again, he had written about people going weeks, so I thought, well, I'll see what I can do. Amazing things shifted for me. Amazing things. Before I fasted, I couldn't fly. Right? So, it's incredible stuff. Now, the truth is, it was incredible what happened for me, because I was a child of the 70s, so I tried a little bit of rica. I just tried it, like 3,000 times. And there was a period of my life where I couldn't find the words I wanted. I couldn't put thoughts together anymore. I'd really lost a lot of my mental clarity. And, today, I hear this from people who aren't necessarily using pot or anything else, but even people in their 20s are complaining of lack of mental clarity. It's a very common thing. So for me, fasting shifted all of that really quickly. It was amazing. And some of you how many of you have ever done a water-only fast of, let's say, a week or more? Several of you have. Okay. To the rest of you, you're probably thinking, okay, where's the exit again? Because this guy sounds a little crazy. But it's an interesting thing. When we look at the human body today, we see the average person, right? I think 70% of the U.S. population is now overweight, right? A significant percentage is obese. It's crazy, even in children, right? Some of you that are my age, you're at least 29, aren't you? Yep, I'll be 29 again soon for the 23rd time.
My 30th anniversary.
Exactly, yeah. So, when we were kids, there was like one overweight kid on the playground. And all the rest of the kids were lean. And today it's almost the other way around. It's a very sad thing. But why does the body store fat? There's a reason. Because we're eating too much, right? But why doesn't it just let the excess calories go? It could do that. It's not set up to do that, but why not? There's a reason. You see, in nature, there are famines, right? There are floods and droughts and fires. There are times where there's no food available. And so organisms store fat in order to have something to feed on when there's no food available. So, although most people think, how crazy going weeks without food, you're starving. You're not starving. What happens when you're fasting is your body is living on its reserves, which is why you have them. That's actually what they're for. That's why they're there in the first place, right? Every species on the planet is set up to fast safely, assuming that we're following certain ideas and conditions, because many people think, well, I'm just going to keep living my regular life and I'll live on my fat. But remember how nature is perfect? Now, what I've decided to do was figure out what was happening in nature. And it didn't take much study to figure out that every species on the planet, if it's fasting to heal its body, it lays down and stops moving. Has anyone here ever had an animal, a cat or a dog or a horse or hippopotamus or a giraffe or a donkey? Blue whale fast in your home? Blue whale? You know, what they'll do is they'll lay down and stop moving, right? I mean, they don't even do email, right? No videos, no reading, nothing. They just lay there and close their eyes and rest as completely as possible. And it turns out that this is actually critical to the process, because if we're not doing this, what we wind up doing instead is consuming muscle. And this happens because our bodies are governed by the laws of nature. And one of those laws is called the law of efficiency. And the law of efficiency says every species is always attempting to get the most benefit for the least amount of effort. Right? It makes sense. You do this at work, you do this in your relationships. Right? This is how we operate like every other species. And when we stop eating, the body is looking for the most efficient way to get its fuel needs met. Well, it turns out that breaking down muscle, converting muscle to sugar through a chemical conversion process called gluconeogenesis is more efficient than breaking down fat. So guess what happens when you raise your caloric needs by being active? You lose more muscle. So people think, I'm going to work out while I fast so I don't lose muscle, and they lose more muscle. So what do? We follow all the other species on the planet. But, you know, in fact, it leads me to what we really do. I mean, the big key here is that what differentiates us from every other species, I mean, it's not what you might think. Like, it's not, well, we're completely different than they are. We share over 99% of our DNA with our closest primate relatives. We share over 96% of our DNA with a pig. And I know people who are much closer than that. You probably do too. Okay? So it's not that our systems are so different. They're not. They're actually very similar. The difference is where we live. What do I mean? I mean, there are animals living here in Laguna Beach, right? Yeah, but they live in their bodies. And all the people I know live north of the neck in their heads. Now, ask 20 people how they feel. 17 will tell you, I think I feel, which means what? They're not feeling, they're thinking. Most people make all their decisions about their health, what they're going to eat and what they're going to do from here. And we will never be able to outthink the body or outthink nature. We'll never think ourselves into being healthy. It's not going to happen. If you try to figure out what your optimal diet is from here, and I had a client once who said, I know exactly what my perfect diet is. Every day I need to eat 17 almonds and 3 apples and 1 head of romaine lettuce and 4 carrots and like that. And I was like, huh? You know, I have an old antique watch and it doesn't work, right, anymore. But it's still right 2 seconds every single day. Every single day for 2 seconds, it's perfect. It keeps perfect time, those 2 seconds. Now, how many seconds are there in a day? It's not right a very large percentage of the time. You know, if you try to figure it out, you might get it right like that. Once every 20,000 times, days it might be right for you. Most of the time it won't be, because your needs are changing all the time. So how can you ensure that you're getting all of your body's needs met? Well, there are some things to learn. You know, again, 2 of these ladies spent a whole day with me at the Creating Perfect Health Seminar. We went over that. And was there any valuable information? It's pretty powerful stuff. But the real key is, once we learn it, is to understand how to get into the body. Because our bodies are always telling us exactly what they need. The problem for most of us is we just ain't listening. Right? Either we're not tuned in, or we don't know how to understand the messages, or we're not paying attention to them. I mean, some of the time we know that we're not paying attention. Like when you know your body is saying, put me to sleep now, and you're saying, I'm going to watch the end of the movie. You know? I'm going to finish writing this proposal. I want to read this next chapter. And your body's going, no, put me to sleep. Right? No, I'm not ready yet. And sometimes we're completely disconnected. I mean, how many people think that humans are the smartest species on the planet? Anybody? Well, I can see that. I hear this all the time, right? But let me ask you a question. Who has a dog? Anybody have a dog? Okay. So you come home from work, right? Your dog comes home from work, excuse me, on a long day chasing cars. And it's not good pay, but they love the work anyway. And it's tired. What's it going to do? Lay down and rest, right. But how many people come home from a hard day, tired, and say, man, I'm tired. I'm going to go for a run. Every other species on the planet knows what to do when you're tired. We seem to have confused this somehow. What happens when you go for that run when you're already tired? You feel more energetic afterward, right? But why is that? It's because you forced your body to start pumping out adrenaline, which is a stimulant, which is a powerful chemical that stimulates your system so you feel energetic because you're using up more of the energy you didn't have in the first place. Which means when you're done, when it's all over, you wind up much more depleted than when you started. So we can avoid this problem completely by learning how to listen to our bodies. That's where all the wisdom is. Your body is probably the second most intelligent thing on the planet, after my body. The human body has this virtually infinite intelligence. Nothing is, who do you think is smarter? Your body or your doctor, right? Your body or the pharmaceutical company, right? You have high blood pressure, you take medication. Now, first of all, anyone know anybody with high blood pressure? Probably everyone knows somebody with high blood pressure. Were they told, these people, that they'd have to take this blood pressure medication for a little while until it healed them? No, they're told they're going to take it forever, which is an implicit statement saying it's never going to heal you, right? When you're dead, your blood pressure will come back down. Oh, that's good news, right? Oh, and the even better news is it's going to come down faster if you take the medication, because the stuff will kill you, right? That's what drugs do. They do this because they can only suppress symptoms. So what some of these drug medications, hypertensive medications, do is they slow down your heart rate, right? You got a pump, you got too much pressure in the hydraulic system, you slow the pump down. Oh, pressure comes down. That's great, right? All better, except for one tiny little detail. Who knows better how fast your heart should be beating given your current situation? Your body or the pharmaceutical company? Well, your body might just have a slight edge, in having that access to that information. What happens when you slow down your heart rate is you slow down the amount of oxygen and nutrients that reach your brain. So the number one reported side effect of these medications is depression, because you don't feel good if you're not getting enough oxygen to the brain. The number one unreported side effect, in my humble opinion, stupidity, for the same reason. How clearly will you think if your brain's not getting what it needs? That's what happens when you use these drugs. Okay? So let's look at this whole idea of suppressing symptoms. In fact, again, this is Southern California. This is different than the rest of the universe, right? So everyone here knows what a healing crisis is, right? But sometimes, I hear people say, well, I'm not sure if this is a healing crisis or if I'm really sick. I've got news for you. Every time you're sick, it's a healing crisis. There is nothing else. Every symptom you ever experience is evidence that your body is cleansing or healing. Every single symptom. That's what they're for. Okay, if you put your arm through the bandsaw, Chris, when you're working out there, I don't mean that kind of symptom. That's different. Right? Get that sewn back together. That would be a good thing. Trauma medicine is very beneficial and powerful and can keep you alive. I'm alive 2 or 3 times because of trauma medicine. But for anything else, I have not been to a doctor in 25 years, and I will never go to a doctor again for anything but trauma. I would never take medication again, under any circumstances, because it doesn't create health. all it can do is suppress symptoms. If it created health, first of all, in order to correct a problem, don't they have to know what the problem is? But aren't they always telling you, we don't really understand what's causing this, but take this drug. Why should I take the drug? Because it makes us a lot of money. Right? It's because it's the only thing they have to try to deal with the symptoms, to alleviate the pain. And because most of us, I mean, we have enough people here, one of you, I'm not sure which one, but one of you probably likes pain. Right? But the rest of you probably not. So if you have symptoms, you might want to eliminate them if you can. I mean, you feel better if the symptom goes away. But are you better? Has it really helped you? Let's look at a simple example. You wake up one morning with a head full of mucus. Has this ever happened to you? Once or twice? Right? What do you do? What do most people do? They go to the medicine cabinet, they take out a decongestant, they take out some medication, right? Over the counter, prescription, whatever. That's what most people do. And within 15 minutes to 2 hours, depending on what it is, the congestion is gone. And you feel better, and you think, I am better, so why not? But what if we step back and look at this idea that your body created this mucus on purpose? Now, why would it do that?
To get rid of stuff.
That's right. Your body creates mucus to encapsulate something so you can more readily eliminate it. Okay? Now, your body has virtually infinite intelligence. If it was doing that, there was a reason. It wasn't like a mistake. You know, your body doesn't make those kinds of mistakes. There was a reason to do this. We come along and we take away the best method of eliminating something. We eliminate the mucus. Now what does the body have to do? If it can't get rid of it, it has to keep it. It has to store it somewhere. More garbage stuck in the body. Eventually we call these things tumors, cysts, fibroids. That's what this stuff is. Lipomas, right? So, are we better off now that this garbage is stuck in the body? We feel better, but we're not better off. The body is more toxic because it was trying to cleanse, and we prevented that from happening, and because the remedy itself, the thing we were taking to make that happen, was toxic to us as well. Every drug is poisonous, right? Every single one. And most other substances are just as toxic. So many of the alternatives, I said before, I was glad I didn't go down that route, because most alternatives are working on the same fallacious principle that you can take something toxic to the body and it's going to make you better. It can't. It can only suppress symptoms.
Can I ask a question? There's like a formula, a wellness formula that I take when I start feeling like I'm coming down with something, and it's herbs that kind of boost up your immune system to help. Is that the same kind of thing you're talking about? Or is that
It is indeed the exact same thing. I will, my opinion, well, first of all, if you pick up Peterson's field guide to Peterson does all these field guides to plants. Peterson's field guide to North American herbs says on the third or fourth page, I have to paraphrase because it's been 20 years since I looked at it, something like, every plant in this book is toxic. All herbs are poisonous to you. That's why your herbalist says you can take echinacea to prevent the cold, but you can only take this quantity at a time or this number of days in a row, and you have to stop. Has anyone ever said to you, I mean, apple a day will keep the doctor away, but don't eat an apple more than 3 days in a row. Don't have more than 2 apples at a time. Of course not. Okay? Herbs are toxic to the body, and I want you to understand something. The only way to get your immune system stronger is to rest. Get enough sunlight. Eat properly. Make sure you're hydrated. It's meeting all your body's needs. There's nothing you can take. There are no magic bullets. We all wish there were, right? I mean, we want to believe this stuff because that makes it much easier. Just take this thing and you'll feel better. And you will feel better, but you won't be better. Nothing can do that for you. There's no instant remedy. In fact, just the opposite. Anything that you take or do that instantly makes you feel better is suspect. Because it's doing something, it's suppressing something. I mean, things that boost the immune system are usually toxic enough that the immune system has to work harder to deal with them. But this isn't the way to get healthier. Almost everything we take in the name of a remedy is simply suppressing the symptoms that we are experiencing. And so people feel better, but they're actually more toxic for the reason I explained a minute ago. So it's important to understand that medicine is never going to make you healthier. Never. In fact, the first leading cause of death in the United States today is still heart disease, although cancer is rapidly gaining. And they're very close now. Cancer is number 2. Anyone know what the third leading cause of death is in the United States?
Diabetes?
It's called iatrogenic disease. Anyone know what iatrogenic disease is?
The cure.
It's caused by the medical.
That's correct. Iatrogenic disease means caused by doctors or medicines. Doctors and medicines kill more people than anything in the country besides cancer and heart disease. And doctors have the shortest lifespan of any professional in the United States. Well, they have the most stressful job, right? No, they do not. Jobs are rated on stress. Air traffic controllers, the most stressful job, and they live much longer than doctors. Okay, it's not about stress. Okay, doctors know nothing about health because they don't learn about health in school. They learn about how to suppress the symptoms of disease. And the truth is that much of the alternative practices out there are doing the same kinds of things in different ways. Ways that are more acceptable to some of us, perhaps, but they're not really about health. And so I've worked with, I've had as clients many alternative practitioners, have rarely seen a healthy one. And they all think they're healthy because they're alternative practitioners. They're some of the most difficult clients I ever have. They don't listen because they think they already know. But the problem is that they're working from here rather than from here in the body. And that's where all the answers and all the wisdom is. Okay, so I figured out that I couldn't rely on medicine, I couldn't really rely on alternatives, and I couldn't rely on nutrition. And it's an interesting thing. Intelligent people all know, everyone here probably knows, right? This is an intelligent group, and you know how I know that? The most intelligent people always come here. So, intelligent people probably know that standard American diet is crap. Is anyone surprised to hear that? Standard American diet is crap. But you know what people do? They try to improve it. Intelligent people say, well, it's crap, so I'm going to substitute this for a leaner version, or this for a higher fiber version. But let me ask you a question. If your bicycle were run over by a train, would you try to fix it? What you'd have would be a completely useless vehicle. Okay? But the standard American diet is a completely useless vehicle if what you're trying to do is get from where you are to the amazing level of health and vitality you could experience. The standard American diet is useless. It just don't go. But we keep trying to fix it. What we need to do is throw it away and start over with something that actually runs, something that actually works. See, what's true is that if we get our bodies clean and then we learn how to meet all of our body's needs as well as possible, what's inevitable is an amazing level of health and vitality and mental clarity and spiritual connection, because it's all about, are you vibrating at the same frequency as nature? Unless your body's clean and operating well, you're not. And so that connection's never the same. Okay? You can have all of that if you're willing to do what you need to do and learn what that is and then actually do it. You can have it. It almost doesn't matter. And I'm going to be honest with you. So this won't, what I'm talking about here, this won't work for every single person. Not everybody, almost, but not everybody. If you're sitting here tonight and you're already dead, this isn't going to help you. Okay? Okay? If you're not quite dead yet, it'll help you because your body was designed to cleanse and heal itself. It has an amazing ability to do that if we give it the right conditions and the right opportunity. That's what it's all about. That's what it's set up to do. It's amazing what happens. Now, I frequently see people that say, well, I don't need to fast. I'm already clean. My body's already clean. right? I had a woman who contacted me. We used to have a 17-week internship program, so people spent more than 4 months at my center. They started with a 21-day water fast, 7 days of supervisory feeding, and then 13 more weeks living, working, meditating, exercising with me, guiding them through this whole process. And this woman contacted me and said, I want to come to the internship program, but I don't need to fast, I'm already clean. Really? She said, yep. For the last 3 years, I've been traveling around the U.S. leading master cleanses. I've done it 20 times. My body's clean. I said, well, if you want to do the program, you have to do the fast. It's not optional. Okay? Why do you think I said that? Well, because I've learned over the years, no matter what they've been doing, their bodies aren't clean. It doesn't happen. I mean, you know, many people think that this is nonsense. How toxic can our bodies really be, right? There was a study published 7 or 8 years ago. They looked at 75 persistent environmental toxins. So these are things like dioxin. Heard of that one? Polychlorinated biphenyls, PCBs. Nasty, I mean, these are nasty chemicals, most of which have been outlawed decades before this study was accomplished. You know what they found? The average person in the study was carrying more than 50% of these substances, 38 or more of them, in their bodies in measurable quantities. How's that possible? Well, that's what a persistent toxin is. It doesn't break down easily. So it's in the water. It's in the soil. They wind up in the air. And we wind up coming in contact with them all the time. Now, if you were to go back to the people that were talking about some of these ideas 100 years ago, they would have said, the vast majority of toxins in the average body doesn't even come from outside the body, what we call exogenous toxins. They're actually endogenous. They're created in the body. Created in the body? What's created in the body? Well, every cell of your body is like a separate living organism. It has to feed, it has to process that food, it has to eliminate waste. But the average body becomes so overwhelmed, constipated on a cellular level, it's not able to outprocess its own waste. So, do any of you remember 20 or so years ago, there was a garbage strike in New York City? Right? For months, there was no garbage collection in New York City. Was anybody there, by any chance? You were there at the time.
Well, I know.
Okay, fine. I know what you mean. Sometimes I'm just kind of here too. But I've known people who said they were there at the time. They had to drop their trash bags out of their 6-story window because the piles were so high on the streets you couldn't get it up to the top otherwise. Right? The whole city was like a stinking mess for months. That's what it's like inside the average human body. Because the body can't outprocess its own waste. Well, how much difference could it make would it make if it could? There was a Nobel Prize winner by the name of Alexis Carrel. And one of the things that Carrel did was he took chicken heart tissue and kept it alive for 32 years.
Wow.
32 years. In fact, the experiment ended because the experimenter ended. Carrel died. His research assistant neglected to change the fluid bath one day. They used to change it every single day because it's in a petri dish. The tissue has no way to eliminate its own toxins from the dish, right? So they would change the fluid every single day. One day, they didn't change the fluid bath. That was the end of the tissue. Experiment was over. How long could it have gone? Who knows? How long could you go if your tissues were constantly bathed in clean fluid? They're not. How do I know this? Because I've taken thousands of people through water-only fasts of averaging 24 to 25 days. And what happens is nothing short of amazing. Now, some of you have been told or have heard that a diet, maybe a raw food diet, for instance, will heal you. Anyone heard this? Or superfoods or juices will heal you. They won't. It can't happen. And the reason why is simple. There is one thing on the planet that can heal your body. You're sitting in it right now. It's called your body. You see, every organism is self-healing. No diet heals us. The best that a diet can do, the optimal diet, is the diet that meets all your body's needs without being part of the problem. most of what most people are eating every single day is actually creating problem. And this is stuff you may not know about, right? And in fact, you know what? Because I'm not here for the seminar, I'll give you a hint. I'll tell you a little piece that most people aren't aware of. Just over 10 years ago, scientists in Sweden discovered that everyone in quick story. They started out trying to figure out what was the increased risk of cancer for people working with a known carcinogenic compound. Okay, so you probably know that migrant farm workers come up from Mexico to California, they pick grapes and other things, and they're working with pesticides, and they wind up with high risk cancer. Shouldn't be surprising, right? You're handling toxic stuff, it gets into your body. So they figured if people are working in this industrial process with a carcinogenic compound, their rates of cancer would be higher. But that's not what they found. They found there was no increased risk of cancer. They wanted to know why. So what they did was, they set out looking to figure that out. It took them a while, but what they figured out was, the average person in Sweden was eating this chemical several times a day. Why would anyone do that? Well, they weren't doing it on purpose. Many of you are eating this chemical several times a day too, because it's in every cooked complex carbohydrate. Bread, potatoes, corn, pasta, cereals, rice, you name it. Any complex carbohydrate, and all vegetables contain complex carbohydrate. Any complex carbohydrate, when cooked, you actually create this toxic compound. Okay? Now, they could have stopped there, patted themselves on the back. They didn't. They formed a consortium of research institutes all over Europe. There's about 10 schools working together now for 10 years, and they have found hundreds of toxic compounds created whenever any food is cooked. How many species on the planet eat cooked food? Just one, and the ones we give it to. Okay, and we're the ones that are getting sick. So, I don't eat cooked food for more than 20 years. Okay? And if you want to be as healthy as possible, you need to understand what an optimal diet is. And that's just part of it. I gotta be honest with you, there are many people that eat only raw and aren't very healthy. Because it's about what exactly are you eating. Does it belong in the body or not belong in the body? Well, I started out telling you that I was very, very sick 28 years ago. Figured it out 25 years ago. I haven't been sick one single day in 25 years. Not a headache or a cold or a flu or a stomach ache or anything else. And everybody can experience the exact same thing. Okay, and it's not just the absence of being sick, it's the presence of an amazing level of vitality. Because I feel much better now at 51 than I did at 18. My body works better now at 51 than it did at 18. And yours can too. So, there are endogenous toxins created in the body, which most people are full of, literally, right? And the next time someone says you're full of shit, you might think, yeah, maybe. There are exogenous toxins that we take in from all kinds of sources, and this creates a huge issue. And many people for years, 100, 200, 300 years, there's a group of people who have been saying that's the cause of all disease. Toxicity, a toxic body. And I believe that for a long time. I clearly see every single person, more than 2,000, who've spent an average of 24, 25 days fasting with me, their bodies were very toxic. And we see amazing things shift when we change that, including 100% success with hypertension, eliminating hypertension, 100% success eliminating type 2 diabetes, 100% success with lower GI tract problems if people fast long enough, with candida problems if people fast long enough. And will the diet cleanse? Let me tell you a quick story. Will the diet cleanse your body? I had a client, 12, 13 years ago, I was speaking in a big event in Portland, Oregon. And I met a guy there who, at the time, we offered this full package, a full program of information called the Creating Perfect Health System. And we still have it, but usually I have a hard product. Right now it's only digital, and it's not online yet. And this, by the way, quick commercial, good news for you, because it's $295, And it's unconditionally guaranteed to teach you everything you need to know about how to take your body and health to the highest level possible. Until we get it online in about a week, for you, it's $195. Email me, we'll have to figure out how to payment, and I'll send you a link to it, okay? That's all I'm going to say about that. But he bought this whole package of more than 16 hours of lectures and seminars on CDs and DVDs, and 40 or so written pages of material. And every year I would talk to him and say, when are you going to come fast? And he would say, why would I need to fast? I'm eating a perfect diet. The diet's going to heal me. The diet's going to cleanse my body. And I kept trying to convince him it wouldn't. Finally, I succeeded in doing that just over a year ago. So December 2010, he came and spent the time with me. About a week into his fast, every day I'm taking vital signs and asking people how they're doing. And about a week into it, I said, has anything changed for you today? He said, yeah. He said, my urine started to smell like photographic developer. Anyone here develop photographs? You know this chemical? It's nasty stuff, right? Strong. So this is my urine starting to smell like this chemical. I said, well, Jeff, that's not a surprise. You're a photographer. Right? Again, if you're working with this chemical, it's going to get in your body. You're going to breathe in the fumes. You might touch it every once in a while. He said, Lauren, I don't develop my own photographs. Oh. Did you ever develop your own photographs? I asked him. He said, yeah. My father was a photographer too. I grew up with a darkroom in my house. But I haven't handled the chemical in 43 years. So 43 years, this chemical was stuck in his body, and 11 years of that time, he was eating what I would call a close to perfect diet. And we didn't eliminate any of it. A week into a water fast, he started eliminating it, and 2 weeks into the water fast, he finished eliminating it. Okay, that's the kind of thing we see. The reason this happens is because every single day, if you're eating, your body is putting roughly 50% of all of your energy or more into processing your food. 35% into running your brain and central nervous system. That leaves 15% of your body's energy for everything else you need to do. All the physical motions, all the functions of all your organ systems, 15% of your daily energy. When you fast, you liberate 50%. If you're resting as completely as possible, you liberate another 6, 7, 8%, who knows. You go from having maybe 1% of your energy available to cleanse and heal the body to having 50 or 60 times that much energy available. And what can happen in 3 or 4 weeks is incredible. Now, if I came to you and said, listen, you can't be healthy unless you have brown crayons, and I happen to sell brown crayons, you would have every right and responsibility to yourself to be skeptical about that. Okay? Anytime someone tells you that you need what they have, you might want to give it a little bit of thought. It may be true. It may not be true. Right? They may have a reason to tell you that. So I'm telling you that you need something that I offer. I offer fasting. You may have every right to be skeptical. But here's what I'll tell you. It's the single most empowering and powerful thing you can do for yourself. And I would encourage each of you to figure out how to take a month out of your life, because a 21-day fast is a 28-day stay somewhere, and go do this. And if you don't want to come to me, that's okay. Find a place that you feel comfortable with and that you resonate with and that you trust. And I'll help you no matter where you're going. You have questions? Send me an email. I run a nonprofit organization and I've never taken salary in 15 years. That will change at some point. But I don't do this for the money. Okay? So if I can help you, great. That's why I do what I do. I mean, maybe you can tell, but I kind of enjoy doing this. Right? So make this happen if you can. It's an incredible, incredible thing. I'm going to take questions a little bit later. Just hang on to your questions. Write them down so you don't forget them. How are we doing time-wise? Yeah, we still have plenty of time. All right. So I'm thinking along these same lines. I'm seeing all these people detoxing all this crap and thinking it's all about the toxins. And the toxins, the toxicity of the body, is real and it has a huge impact. A huge impact on our health and vitality and mental clarity and all of that. But I began to realize 5 years ago it wasn't the primary problem. It's actually a secondary problem. What's the primary problem? Well, let me tell you what happened. 5 years ago, I invested in the center's first bioimpedance analyzer. Anyone here familiar with bioimpedance analysis? Bioimpedance analysis is where you take a small, tiny amount of electric current, pass it through the body, and using a complex algorithm, these machines are designed to calculate what percentage of body fat, what percentage of muscle mass, and what your degree of cellular hydration is. And a good one is pretty accurate. So we got this machine at the time. We were open 9 weeks, closed 4, open 9, closed 4. That's what allows me to be here because we're closed right now. And we were closed at the time. I had 2 staff members who fasted with me in the last year or 2 before and had lived at the center ever since. And I had several students who had been through this process and had done their 21-day fast, a week of refeeding, and then 4 more weeks. So 5 weeks of eating an optimal diet, in my opinion, right? And we measure everybody. And everyone measures between 72 and 76% water. And I think, okay, I'm believing the body should be 75% water. We're doing pretty well. Well, 2 days later we open, and we have a whole group, 12 or 14 guests coming in. We start measuring their levels of body fat, muscle mass, and hydration. But looking at hydration, I'm seeing 50%, 54%, 58%, 47%, 37%. And I'm thinking, no, the friggin' machine doesn't work. How could anybody possibly survive with half as much water in their body as they should have? And the manufacturer, the machine that we use was manufactured by the company that invented this technology 40 or 50 years ago. This technology has been around for a while. Until recently, if you wanted to get it, you needed to have a $5,000 machine. Now you can buy a $30 machine. They're not very good. The one we use is $400 or $500. There's a whole range of things out there. The manufacturer is not very helpful. In fact, the one that I use now, the machine talks to my computer, right, Bluetooth. I program information for you, and then get you measured, and then it sends that information to my computer. And there's bar charts that show up on this page. But the bar charts would say things like, well, if you're a 50-year-old woman and you've got 35% body fat, that's perfectly fine. In what universe is 35% body fat healthy? I mean, it's common, but is it healthy, right? And it says if you're a 50-year-old woman and you are 56% hydrated, no problem. I'm going, what are they talking about? So I called the company and said, hey, I've got your device. I run this wellness center. We measure a lot of people. And I'm seeing these numbers that don't make any sense. I mean, like what you're saying here doesn't seem to make sense. And they said, Lauren, this information comes directly from the American Medical Association. How could it be wrong? Right? And I said, I think you just answered your own question. Right? Came from the American Medical Association. What they're doing is they're telling us what's average. This is what's normal, right? Now, many of you want to be normal. Oh, look, I got normal blood pressure. No, that's not what you want. Remember, normal people have an 80% chance of dying of cancer, heart disease, or stroke. You want to be very abnormal, right? You want to be way above normal. So we're looking at these numbers and trying to make sense of them, and it finally occurs to me, because the manufacturer never says this anywhere, but body fat contains no water. You see, it takes water to make fat, and when your body is breaking down fat, it releases water, which is how the polar bear, anyone see the Planet Earth video series? Amazing documentaries. In the first one, Pole to Pole, the polar bear emerges from her den. She's been underground 5 months, had nothing to eat and nothing to drink. She's birthed 2 cubs and has been feeding them, having consumed nothing. And she's lost half her body weight. The fat has been converted to water and milk. Okay? And she's gotten everything she needed for 5 months. So, I mean, again, every species on the planet is set up to polar bears are rather large. They can go a long time. But when we looked at what was happening, it became apparent that if someone had 37% hydration, that's because they were 50% body fat. So they're only going to be half of what we expect to see. So I figured out how to correct for that. And now what I do is I give my clients their lean hydration number. I can say to you, here's all your numbers, and this is what percentage of your lean tissue is water. It should be 80%. How many of you, who wants to guess? I've measured in the last 5 years more than 1,500 people. What percentage of those 1,500 do you think are close to the 80% lean hydration that we should see? Anybody want to guess?
10.
10%?
3.
150, 3%? That's what, 45 people? Anybody else? What do I hear over here? 5%, 75 people? Anybody else? 1%? 15 people? You were closest, except it wasn't 1%. There was actually 2 people out of 1,500 that were close to properly hydrated, and you're looking at one of them. Only one other person in 5 years was even close, because the average person was 15 to 16% dehydrated. Some worse, some a little better. Average between 15 and 16% dehydrated. Now, Sebastian, are you at school?
Mm-hmm.
What do you study?
Human biology.
Okay, college?
Mm-hmm.
So 85 with 15% wrong, that's an 85%, that's a B, that's not so bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's got a B in hydration, that's not so terrible. But think about it this way. Your blood is 92 to 93% water. How well would you be functioning if you had 15% less blood than you need to have all the time? Probably not very well. Being 15% dehydrated is a big deal. Now, fortunately, because we live in these incredibly intelligent organisms, you're never going to have 15% less blood, at least not unless you're soon to become an X-person. Anyone here know how George Washington died? George Washington had hypertension. He went to his doctor. His doctor performed what was back then the typical procedure. They would bleed him, right? You take some of the blood out, what happens to the pressure? It goes down for 24 hours. Then the body works real hard to make more blood, right? But sometimes they let out a little too much. So Martha got a phone call. Martha, it's Dr. Smith, got some good news, bad news. Which do you want first? Give me the good news. Good news is George's blood pressure is much lower than when he got it. So your body is going to do its best to make sure you have enough blood, that your heart, brain, lungs, liver, kidneys have all the water they need. But in order for that to happen, what's it going to have to do? It's going to have to take water away from other systems, from other aspects of your body. Does that make sense? There's no other way, right? So, and those places in your body aren't going to be 15% low. They're going to be 30 or 40% low. So, there's theories, 3 that I've seen so far. There's theories of aging. Isn't that interesting? Like the experts don't know why we age. They have theories that are not accepted. There's no agreement. There's 3 different ideas about why humans age. Well, there were 3. There's now 4, because I have another one. See, think about all the stuff that breaks down as we get older. What kind of things break down, consistently, typically break down as people get older? Knees?
Knees.
Joints, can we say in general?
Sure.
Joints?
Eyesight.
Eyesight? What else?
Hearing.
Hearing? Hair?
Brain function.
Brain function, okay. What else? How about
Digestion.
skin? Right? How about, what's interesting, when we program older people, I ask people how tall they are to put this in the system, and they'll say things like, well, I used to be, right? Because people shrink as they get older, don't they? So let's look at some of these things. Why does almost everybody start to lose their eyesight as they get older? I think it was in Scottsdale, Arizona. I had 30 people in the room, and half of them were older than 60, and all of them wore glasses. Everyone. It's common. Most people over 60 are on hypertensive medications in this country. Most people. In fact, the average person my age takes 3 medications every day. Wow. Okay? So in fact, many of them are obviously taking more than if that's average, because I'm not taking any. So what's going on here? Why are these things happening consistently over and over again with one person after the next? Well, your body is looking for places to take water from that are not critical to being alive. What are your eyes made of? They're like balls of jelly. It's all water. Your eyes are deforming over time as you age, not because of how many years you've been alive, but because every day your body's looking for places to take water from. Okay? You don't get wrinkled from exposure to the sun. How do I know that? I live in the tropics, and I'm in the sun as much as I can be. Okay? When I lived in the US, since 1984, I've driven only vehicles with the sunroof. When I lived in the US, my sunroof was always open if it was sunny. It's not sun. I had a client just 6 months ago, my age, his face looked like a road map. Why do some people have way more wrinkles than other people? The difference is our skin loses elasticity because it's drying out. Okay, if you have old shoes, leather shoes, or a saddle, or an old jacket, I mean, when it was on the cow, it was perfectly hydrated. No problem, right? Flexible and no problem. But as soon as you take it off the living animal, there's problems. And over time, it's going to dry out and crack. And that's what happens. It's losing elasticity because it's losing hydration. It's not about the number of years, it's about the number of years of chronic dehydration.
So how do you stay hydrated?
Well, why do people shrink? The discs in your back are essentially bags of water, and they're deflating over time. Now, again, this is an idea, it's a theory, except that over the last years, I have seen each of these things reverse themselves over and over again. I've seen older people lose their wrinkles, get taller. Almost everybody improves their eyesight. Joint problems, same thing. Connective tissue, mostly water. That's what gives it lubrication. Okay, it's drying out. Each of these aspects can shift by getting rehydrated. Now, how do you do it? And I want you to understand something. The typical person who comes to my center is probably not so different from most of you. Intelligent, educated, and incredibly attractive. What's true is that these are not the average American. The people at McDonald's, they don't come to me. They're not sitting here tonight, and they don't come down to my center. I don't see those people. Imagine how dehydrated somebody is if they're eating that crap all the time. See? So first of all, how do we get dehydrated? How did this happen? I had an email from a client just 2 weeks ago, and she said, Lauren, why do people need to drink so much water? No other species does this. No other species needs to drink so much water. Why do we? It's an excellent question, right? So let me explain why. Have you ever eaten corn chips? You've eaten corn chips, everybody? Okay. How much water would you guess is in those corn chips? Let's be scientific about this. We'll say 0, give or take 0. So, margin of error, right? That's the scientific thing to do, I think. So, when those corn chips come back out of your body, right, they take a little journey from here to the other end. When they come back out of your body, are they as dry as when they went in? You better hope not. You're going to be rather uncomfortable if they are, aren't you? So they go in dry, they come out wetter than that. Where's the water coming from? It's coming from your body, isn't it? Now let's look at what happens in nature. Millions of times every single day out there in nature, animals, most of them eat plants. Most animals eat plants. They're eating fruit, they're eating leaves, they're eating roots and shoots and soft parts of plants, which are mostly water, 80 to 90% water. So most animals, every time they eat a plant-based meal, they're getting 80 to 90% water. What happens when a carnivore, a real carnivore, not pseudo-carnivores in tennis shoes, real carnivores, when they eat a meal in nature, what happens? Anyone know? It's a little bit gory. What do? First thing that happens, mountain lion, you have here? Mountain lion kills a deer, what's the first thing it's going to do?
Eat the heart.
Drink the blood.
Drink the blood as the animal's bleeding out. Then it eats the heart, eats the water-rich internal organs. So blood, 92, 93% water. Water-rich internal organs, 90% water. Then it eats the muscle meat, which is a maximum of 65% water if the mountain lion doesn't cook it. Because what people do is they take just that piece of muscle and they cook most of the water out of it. Then they put it between two pieces of bread and have it with potato chips and a cup of coffee or a soda or a beer, all of which are diuretics. And salt, right? So every time people eat a typical meal, they're sucking water out of their body. They should be putting water into their body. So I'm going to put some numbers. I'm making these numbers up. Please understand, these aren't real numbers. But imagine that with every meal we eat, if we ate the way we were supposed to eat in nature, we would get 10 ounces of perfect water. I'm just making that number up, right? 10 ounces of perfect water. But we're not getting 10 ounces of perfect water. We're getting no water. And we're actually losing 10 ounces of perfect water. We're not 10 ounces behind with each meal. We're 20 ounces behind. Do that 3 times a day, you're 60 ounces behind. And here's the issue. The water in your plant foods is perfect water. It's been distilled by the plant. The molecular structure is exactly what we need because water comes in clusters. H2O, that's a water molecule, but it's not liquid water. To have water, you need 5 to 7 molecules clustered together. Your body has to break these clusters down. The water we drink is 10 to 20 times harder to get that water into your cells than the water in your perfect food. So if you're 60 ounces behind with 3 meals a day, it's going to take you between 600 and 1,200 ounces of typical drinking water in order to make that up. And it never happens. Anyone drink that much? You probably would drown. You would die if you tried. You can't drink that much. It would kill you, literally. You would dilute your electrolytes and die. Okay? And what happens when we're taking in water, your body is attempting in every moment of your life to take itself to the highest level of health and balance. So there's all this garbage in the body, endogenous and exogenous toxins, and the body is using the water coming in to try to clean itself out. But it's never able to. It never completes the process. So we have this vicious cycle. The water comes in, it goes in to try to cleanse the body. Because, see, every channel of elimination, right? What are the primary channels of elimination? Urinary tract,
Skin.
colon, skin, the breath, the mucous membranes. What do all those 5 channels have in common? What do they all require in order to work?
Water. Fluid.
Water. Water is the universal transport medium. Nothing moves in any of those channels without enough water. So the average person gets dehydrated from this typical crummy diet and then is never able to reverse that until they stop eating and give the body a chance to really put all of its energy into mobilizing these toxins out of the body. So the only person I've measured besides myself who was well hydrated was someone who had fasted with me a couple times before and maintained an optimal diet. A lot of people come back to see us, but they haven't made optimal choices since their last visit. And so they're not as well hydrated. And what happens to many people is, when you're fasting, your level of hydration is not going to go up significantly, if at all. Why not? Because your body's putting every ounce of water possible into cleansing itself. So hydration can't really change much. That happens once the body's cleaned out. But by the time that starts to shift, people are back home, so I can't measure them. The people I'm measuring at the center, first when they arrive and later when every week, and when they leave, they're not there yet. That's why we don't see more of them. All the people who leave and keep making excellent choices, they're going to see huge increases in their level of hydration. But I don't get a chance to measure most of those people. Okay? It's not that they're not out there. There aren't so many, but even the ones that are, I don't really get a chance to measure them. That's how we can get hydrated, and it's, as far as I can see, it's the only thing that works. Now, 2 years ago, at this same time, this time of year, during this break, I did a lecture tour of Florida. And I was going to be in West Palm Beach, and so a woman contacted me and said, "What are you going to be talking about?" I said, "I'm going to be talking a lot about, this, that, and the other, and hydration." And she said, "Oh, well, we're hydrated. And my partner and I, we're hydrated. We don't have to worry about that." I said, "Really?" She said, "Yeah. We have this fancy machine, that does this special water. You've heard of these things, right? Alkaline water, structured water, all this stuff. We've got one of these machines." I said, "Great. When I come in 3 weeks, I'm going to have that machine with me. On this trip, I had a lot of things to take back with me. I decided not to bring along because it's a big, heavy device, so I don't have it with me. It's a shame because it would be fun to measure some of you guys. But I had it with me 2 years ago, and I measured she and her partner, and guess what? Their fancy water made absolutely no difference. No special machine has ever made a difference. Everyone says, oh, this machine gets you better hydrated. It doesn't happen. I mean, we're not measuring that. People think, well, I'm a raw foodist, right? You know, they're telling me I'm a raw foodist. Or I drink, 400 ounces of green smoothies every day. Or juices, or what. It doesn't change anything.
How come raw food doesn't? Oh, because it's all
Because you have to get the body clean first before that the body can really get that water into the cells. Until that time, it's this cycle where it's trying to cleanse and never has a chance to. So, people that are eating a perfect raw food diet, they may be a little bit better hydrated, but first of all, it has to be perfect, right? I own a dehydrator, but I don't know where it is, and I don't care where it is. I left it with a girlfriend in Ontario, Canada, 10 years ago, and I haven't seen it since, and I don't care. Because dehydrators are from the devil. Because the most important thing in your food is not the nutrients. All the nutrients we need for a whole year would fit into a thimble. The most important thing is that perfect water. So if you're constantly consuming things that have no water in them, they're going to be sucking the water out of your body. Raw or not raw, it doesn't make any difference. Your food should be high water content food as often as possible. Now, once you get to an amazingly high level of health, if you want to occasionally make an exception, your body will be able to recover pretty quickly. But if you're on a journey to get from an average or better than average to an amazing level of health, you're just going to slow that trip way down by doing things that are an impediment to getting there. Okay? So it's important to make the best choices. And I'll give you a few hints right now. I've already told you some of these. Stop consuming anything dry. Don't consume it. Everything you consume should be high in water content. Stop consuming salt, vinegar, spices, oil, alcohol, caffeine. All of these things are sucking the water out of your body. Soda. Absolutely. All these things are sucking the water out of your body. Okay? The water you drink, you want to sip. Now, by the way, how important is drinking water? I mean, Rita said, without drinking water. You're sure to get hydrated without water. Right, that's what she said. Let me explain to you why she said that. Okay, don't tell her this, but... No, what's true is that, you see, most people are drinking 8, 10, 12 glasses of water a day or more. Anybody want to guess how many glasses of water I drink on average?
3.
2 to 3 every week. Every week. Most days, not at all. Don't need to. Our closest primate relatives almost never drink water. We're not designed to drink water. We're designed to eat the right food. Get your body clean, learn how to eat properly, and you will need very little water. Okay, so it's not about drinking more water. Now, in the meantime, if you are going to be, you do need to drink water until you get hydrated, until you get cleaned out and hydrated. Sip your water. You see, your body has to break these large clusters of molecules down. So if you guzzle it, you take a whole glass and tip it back, you've rented that water. It's going to run right through. You want to own it? Sip it. Give your body a chance to actually take it apart in time. Okay? These are some keys that are going to be really important. Stay out of dry saunas. Stay out of places that are going to suck the water out of your body. Okay?
Dry saunas? Do you mean like infrared saunas?
Yeah,
Oh no.
I do. I do mean those. Most of those things, by the way, those bulbs put out very high amounts of electromagnetic radiation. We will never, ever improve on nature. We will never improve on nature. You want to get infrared? Step out into the sun and get the whole spectrum. That's what we're designed to do. We are tropical animals. How do I know that? Well, Would anybody here like to live in Laguna Beach, which is beautiful, 12 months of the year in your birthday suit? Without a house, outside, in nature, because doesn't it get a little chilly here every once in a while?
Yeah.
I notice some of you have on several layers. And we're inside a building. See, not only are we tropical animals, from way back when, we're tropical animals right now. You're living in the tropics right now. What do I mean? Tell me your name, please, again. Betsy. Betsy, right here, the center of your abdomen, it's between 95 and 96 degrees all the time. Has to be, because we're warm-blooded tropical animals. We can't maintain our level of health unless we keep this warm, our body warm. So we use clothing and heating and buildings and fire to maintain that. Okay? So, think if you, some more hints, think of what you would do. Here's the question I ask myself. Anytime I'm not sure what to do. What would I do if I lived in the tropical jungle? That's where you get a lot of your answers from. You don't have to go live in a tree. That's not the point. The point is to give your body, as close as possible, the approximation of the conditions that you would have in terms of meeting your body's needs. Your needs for food. What would you eat if you live in the tropical jungle? Right? Sleep. Sunlight. Pure air and water. Emotional poise is a critical piece. These are all the keys. And what I do is I teach people how to meet all of them. None of it is complicated. And for most people, none of it's particularly easy. Right? It's simple, but it's not necessarily easy. But if you're willing to do what you need to do, you will see amazing things shift every single time. Because our bodies are governed by the same laws of nature that govern every other living thing. The problem, the reason most people don't experience an amazingly high level of health is because they're in the way, whether they know it or not. No one's doing it on purpose. But like they say, ignorance of the law is no excuse. Ignorance of the laws of nature doesn't protect you from the inevitable outcomes. Okay? These laws are powerful, have no exceptions, and affect every single living organism, including you and I. If we learn how to meet them, how to meet our body's needs based on these laws, we will have amazing results every single time. You have a question, don't you?
Thank you. I have so many questions. Okay, master cleanse. What do you have to say about it? You mentioned that woman did like 20 master cleanses.
Uh-huh.
I've done it many times too. Do you think that's really bad? Doesn't do any good? How does
It does very little good. It does very, very little good. If you think about, there's lots of these programs out there. And many people, for instance, will say, well, juice fasting is much safer, not true, but much more gentle, true, than a water fast. Let me explain why. If I wanted to take the finish off of this door, I could get a piece of sandpaper and try to sand it off. That might work. I could also go get one of those yellow kitchen sponges and try to take it off with a yellow sponge. Which would be more gentle? Sponge is a lot more gentle because it's not doing much.
Right.
Okay? So
the master cleanse like that, it's not doing much in the same way.
and again, you don't want to be putting toxic things into your body to try to get the result you want. The master cleanse, all of it. All of it.
Lemon, water.
Well, oil, maple syrup,
No oil.
lemon juice. No, okay.
No.
Cayenne pepper,
Cayenne pepper.
toxic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, homeopathics. You said, wellness formula is no good. Homeopathic remedies. What do you think?
Everyone familiar with homeopathics? Everyone know how homeopathics are made? And a homeopathic remedy, the actual substance that was started with, no, it doesn't exist at all. It's not there. You can't measure it.
Right.
What's left is the energy of that substance. Okay. So I would say that homeopathics of any of those things would probably be the least harmful. However, I still don't understand how taking that energy in is going to actually correct the underlying problem. You see, remember, it has to correct the underlying problem, or it's just dealing with symptoms. We go back to the echinacea. Let's say you're feeling a cold coming on, so you take some echinacea, and you don't get a cold. Did that hurt because you had a deficiency of echinacea in your bloodstream?
No.
Is that why you didn't get the cold?
No, it's because it boosts your immune system so it's stronger to fight the cold.
It's not possible. Nothing boosts your immune system except more sleep, better meeting all your body's needs. There's no substance you can take that boosts your immune system. It's a myth. It's marketing propaganda. It's just not true. It's not possible.
What about shifting your body from
Hang on just one
acid
sec.
to ep-
Hang on just 1 second. So I'll come back to your question. The point I was trying to make, though, is that if you didn't have a deficiency of echinacea in your bloodstream, then echinacea is not correcting the cause of the problem.
But the cause of the problem is a germ coming from outside into your body that...
No, it's not. No, Louis Pasteur, on his deathbed, said, I was wrong about that. I come into contact with sick people all the time. In fact, when I meet someone and they've got a cold, and they're like, oh, no, don't touch me, I got a cold. I'm like, give me a big fat kiss. I want them to see it has nothing to do with that. I'm not afraid of your germs. Those germs need to find fertile terrain in order to take hold. They're not going to do anything in a healthy, balanced system. Nothing at all. Insects go after the weakest plant. Pathogens are no different. Okay, it's not about the pathogen. Listen, in order to understand what I'm saying here tonight, and in order to achieve an amazing level of health, it's critical that you shift your paradigm. We've all been living with paradigms that just don't serve us. I mean, how many times have you heard, you got to eat this stuff because it's got these anti-cancer nutrients. You got to eat this stuff because it's got these beneficial, phytochemicals, right? What the message is, what the unspoken piece is that disease is inevitable. If you don't take these steps, you're going to get disease. That's crap. Here's what's true. Perfect health is inevitable if we simply learn how to get out of the way. That's all we have to do. And what I'm talking about, I mean, many people think, well, fasting, that sounds like magic. Like, how does it do all this amazing stuff? It's not magic. What's magic is the power of this organism to cleanse and heal itself. And the reason fasting works in almost every single situation is because it's the best way to get out of the way so your body can cleanse and heal itself. It's not doing anything. It's not healing you. It's not curing anything. Your body's doing that.
What if you're already deficient in some minerals or things in your body?
Okay, fair enough. Let me answer that question. I'm going to come back to you, and then we'll take your question. This is one of those things that I don't know if I would believe if I hadn't seen it over and over again. Although it might make some sense to some of you based on what I've been telling you. In fact, for a second, we seem to believe in this culture that it's all about what we put in here. Let's get a whole bunch of good stuff in there and it'll be good. It has nothing to do with what you put in here. It's all about what gets into your cells. Right? Okay. So first of all, here's a quick little very important piece you want to understand. If you've got a deficiency of any kind, there's only two possible reasons that could be the case. One, your diet is insufficient. Crummy diet, right? All the people down at McDonald's? Fair enough, crummy diet. Two, your body is incapable of assimilating what it needs. It's not getting whatever you put in here into your cells. For most people, both of these things are likely to be true. Now, if you take any remedy, you take a supplement, you use juices, you use green smoothies, whatever it is, are you addressing either of the causes of the problem? No. And therefore, you are not fixing anything. It's a Band-Aid approach. Okay? So what happens when you do fix the problem? You do actually correct the underlying issue. So over the years, I've seen many people with potassium deficiencies, with magnesium deficiencies, with B12 deficiencies, with iron deficiencies. We had a young woman a couple years ago with an iron deficient anemia. And they come in, and while they're consuming only pure water, the deficiency goes away. How does that work? What does that mean? It means that the nutrients were already in the body, but the body wasn't able to assimilate them. As soon as we get the body clean enough to begin assimilating properly, I mean, it's a similar, different, but similar situation where we have people that are underweight. We had a young man 3 months ago that said, more, because he actually spent 6 weeks with me and left when I did 4 weeks ago. So several months back, he contacted me and said, Warren, I've been trying to gain weight. I can't do it. What do you think? I said, you ought to fast. I don't want to lose more weight. I said, yeah, but you need to let your body cleanse itself so it can assimilate properly. So he can be fasted 31 days. This is a guy who's underweight, right? Because the average person has a 6 to 8 week reserve if they're resting. 6 to 8 weeks. And people who are, as I like to say, wealthy in nutrient reserves can go much longer, right? So this man who was underweight to start with fasted 31 days, took his hydration from being 16% dehydrated to 10% in 6 weeks, because he spent 6 weeks at the center. Huge change. And is now building muscle for the first time. Okay? So it's the same idea. We have to get the body clean so it's able to assimilate. And we see virtually every deficiency go away. You know, if you're believing that if you're a vegetarian or vegan, you need B12 supplements, that's nonsense. You don't need them. If you're not getting the B, first of all, you need to understand that the B12, the range for B12 is based on who? Well, the average person. If someone's consuming animal products 3 to 6 times a day, they're going to have more B12 in their system. Doesn't mean that's a good thing. Blood tests are practically useless anyway because they tell you what's in your bloodstream. Where do you want the B12? In your bloodstream or in your cells? They don't measure how much of it's in your cells, they measure what's floating around your bloodstream. Maybe people have high B12, circulating B12, because they can't assimilate it. Okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome. You had a question.
Yeah, what about the acid-alkaline balance? Wouldn't that make a difference in catching a cold? Because I had heard from Edgar Casey, he wrote a book on it, he said that a cold germ could not live in an alkaline environment. Now
Sure.
they're doing research and saying cancer can't live in an alkaline environment.
Absolutely true. No question about it.
So how do you feel you should establish that alkaline acidity?
Meet all your body's needs the way they were designed to be met in nature. You can never improve on that. Get your body clean. Then usually that changes it right there, period, all by itself. And then continue to meet your body's needs by learning what belongs in your mouth. By learning how to do everything you need to do to take care of this vehicle. Imagine you wanted to drive from Laguna Beach to New York City. But you never tune your car up, you never check the oil, you never check the pressure in your tires. Well, that journey might not be very much fun. Okay? I believe we are spiritual beings in a physical incarnation. This is the vehicle that we're using to go through this journey with. All you need to do is meet the manufacturer's specifications. Nothing more, nothing special. You know, the manufacturer said, here's everything you need right here. Oh, we're going to improve on that. There's no need to. There's no other species on the planet that needs supplements or juices or green smoothies or anything else. They just need to learn how, they already know because they live in their bodies, right? How to meet their body's needs the way they were intended to be met. We can easily do the same thing. It's really not very complicated. Okay? You had a question back here first.
Well, you addressed a partial weight issue, so if someone comes in who's obviously a thinner frame
Right.
and goes through it, do they, for example, this gentleman that you're talking about that went through it, how much weight is on a, is there a threshold and is there finally a stopping point for a thin person?
There is. First of all, remember, we're actually measuring body fat. So, in fact, we were talking about body fat before. The average person I've measured over these years is somewhere just north of 30% body fat. Okay? We need between 2 and 2.5% body fat to be alive. That's called essential fat. All the rest, that's reserves for times when there's no food. So the average person is walking around with a lot of reserves. I'm 6% body fat. I have done this myself many times for up to 21 days. No problem. The average person fasting 21 days will lose 21 pounds, although it's not a pound a day. 11 pounds the first week, 7 or 8 pounds the second week, 3, 4 pounds the third week. That's what's typical. Okay? Now, someone who's much bigger than that is going to lose weight much faster. And someone who's much smaller than that is typically going to lose weight more slowly.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And for someone who has done the fast, such as yourself or anyone else that you said has like a pretty optimal diet,
Right.
or consumes really, do you want to address?
No, go ahead.
Okay. How often after the fast, do you recommend or yourself?
How frequently should somebody fast?
Yeah, as someone who is also going back in with a pretty clean diet,
Yeah.
more raw related and.
Sure. It's a great question. And well, I'll tell you what I found is that most people, if they get their body pretty clean in a fast of 3 or 4 weeks, if they were to do that once a year for, say, 3 years, and maintain optimal choices, they would probably never need to do that again, unless there was some specific reason. So when I first learned about fasting and had this amazing experience, I fasted every year for 2 or 3 weeks, for 8 or 9 years. Okay, and I also did a series of shorter fasts, 1-week fasts. Now I can tell you that very short fasts aren't that beneficial because it actually takes 3 to 5 days for your body to get into the deepest part of the process. There's a whole series of physiological changes. There's 4 steps. It's the 4th step, which takes 3 to 5 days to reach, where we get the most benefit from.
Oh, thank you. You answered my other, I didn't want to
Okay,
check with them.
so-
Thank you.
So if someone fasted,
Thank you so much. I will look up your website.
okay, by the way, TanglewoodWellnessCenter.com, for those of you leaving, TanglewoodWellnessCenter.com. Lauren, Tanglewood
Tanglewood.
wellnesscenter.com. Lauren at tanglewoodwellnesscenter.com. Feel free to email me with any questions. Great to see you again, amigo.
Every time I hear you, it gets better.
Thank you. Great to see you again.
So valuable.
I'll see you in another 5 or
So
6 years.
grateful.
Bless you.
Thank you, Rita.
Take care.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Good night. Now, anymore, see what happens, how many of you have noticed that if you skip a couple meals, you don't feel very good, right? That's because you haven't eaten, right? No. That's because when you're not eating, your body begins to detoxify. Because processing food takes so much energy, we can't do that while we're awake and eating all the time. You wake up in the morning, is your breath a little more powerful? Your underarms a little stronger? That's because overnight you've been fasting. In fact, the first meal of the day is called break fast, right? And so your body is detoxifying much more quickly at night than it usually does during the day. So if you have trouble skipping a meal, I've always said the harder it is to skip a meal, the more meals you probably need to skip. Okay? When it gets easy to skip a meal, that's because your body's not cleansing. So I stopped doing this regularly when I realized that I was fasting and feeling perfectly fine the whole time. I could go through 2 or 3 weeks and feel fine. A little more tired, and the leaner you are, the more tired you're going to get, because my body is going to pretty quickly say, I mean, I have 6% body fat. So when I start approaching 3% body fat, my body's going to say, hey, no, don't move, right? Conserve those resources, don't move. So I'm going to feel weak and tired, whereas someone who's 350 pounds isn't going to have that experience, because their body's going, yeah, do whatever you want. You could go for 6 months, pal, right? Now, I do still fast when I need to. So 3 years ago, we had a pull-up bar at the center. And I was doing some pull-ups, and right underneath the bar, there was a little knee wall, this high, concrete. This is in a carport in front of the building, where we were in Panama. We're in Costa Rica now. This is my last location. And when I came down, my feet would hit the wall. So what I would do the whole time, I would do them like this. My knees bent, my ankles locked behind me. And when we put this bar up, it was a piece of galvanized pipe. We hung it with 2 pieces of rope. The rope went over a metal strut, and I thought, that's going to rub on the metal. Let's run it through a piece of garden hose. Great idea, except that you couldn't see the rope. And I kept thinking, I should really take it down and check it. But I didn't do it. And one day I'm up there, been up there for several years, I'm up there, and I'm at the top of the pull-up, and the ropes break. And I fall 5 feet onto the concrete, onto my knees. I broke my right kneecap and the top of my left tibia. And now, what do you think I did? Or what do you think I didn't do? I didn't eat. I didn't go to the doctor, because there's nothing you can do for this really. I didn't eat. I wanted my body to put all of its energy into healing. And 4 weeks later, I was beating my students running up the hill like I always did, often kids in their 20s. Okay, no problem, right? Fast forward, last July, end of July, I'm walking my gardens. We're still in Panama. We moved in September. Still, I'm walking my gardens in shorts and flip-flops, as I always did, almost every night, in the dark, no light. And I'm embarrassed. I had a flashlight in my pocket, a little flashlight. Never thought to use it, see where I'm going. I'm passing, there's one space where it was real narrow. I had it because we kept enlarging the bed because there was a mango tree that was getting bigger and bigger. And then there was a hill, so there was a little bit of space you could walk through. And I'm walking through there and I feel something hit my right foot. I pull up the flashlight and a fer de lance has just bitten me.
I'm sorry, what?
Fer de lance. It's the most poisonous snake in Central America.
Okay.
So I go back to my office. Now we had a little guide in the office, and I was only 5 minutes away, less. I went back to the office to get the guide just to make sure that it was this snake, because there are many snakes that look like poisonous snakes, and I identified it positively. It was that snake. And then I went back to the office and got online to see just how dangerous is this. And I hustled my butt to my car and drove myself to the emergency room, where I waited for a doctor to see me. And by the time I actually was standing in front of the doctor, it had been an hour and 15 minutes, and he didn't believe me that it was this snake. You could see the holes in my foot. My foot was swelling up. But he said, if that snake had bitten you, your whole leg would be swollen up, you'd have trouble breathing, and you'd be in severe pain. And I was having no trouble breathing, and I was not in, my foot hurt, but I was not in severe pain. It was okay. And he took my vital signs. I'm standing looking over his shoulder, and I'm looking at the meter, and I say, well, that's really high. And he said, that's fine, you're 50, that's fine. It's not fine for me. It was 20% higher than my blood pressure and pulse normally were. But I'd run out of there in a hurry, and I'd forgotten to grab my wallet. I had no way to pay him. Right? You know, we're talking about anti-venom, and I'm thinking, you know, okay, I really don't want to, like 25 years, I don't want to take this stuff, but I think I'd rather be alive than stick to my principles, in this case. So I'm thinking about it, but I said to him, I can't pay you. I said, what do you think? Do I really need this? He said, no, go home. If it gets worse, you can come back. Probably not very sound advice, but I gladly took it. And I went home, and I laid down and tried to sleep. And my head started pounding, and I started sweating profusely, and I found that it hurt so much to lay down. I went and sat on a couch where my head could be elevated. And at 4 o'clock in the morning, finally, it stopped hurting so much that I thought I could go sleep. So I went to bed. I slept for 3 hours. When I woke at 7, I took my vital signs. My blood pressure was back to normal for me. Now, normal, as you may know, is 120/80, and people with 120/80 still have heart attacks and strokes. Okay, that's not a healthy blood pressure. My blood pressure was 102/60, which is an excellent blood pressure. Your doctor may not understand that. My pulse was 50/52, which is where you want to be. Most people my age, it's in the 60s or 70s. My temperature was back to its normal, 96.5, because you see the average person's walking around with a low-grade fever all the time as a result of their diet. Because every time you put toxic food in your mouth, which all cooked food is, there's an immune response, and your temperature goes up. So we're tropical animals, right? How do you think you'd be more comfortable? At 98.6 or 96.6? Your body is really working well, your temperature is going to be about 2 degrees lower. And mine was, again. 12 hours after I was bitten by the snake, my vital signs were back to normal, were perfectly fine. So I hobbled around on crutches for a week, not eating. And I would have gone longer than that, except for a couple things. One, my foot was completely healed. There was no pain, there was no swelling at the end of 1 week of fasting. 2, 1 week later, I was leaving for a 4-week lecture tour of the East Coast. And I thought, I don't really want to be, some people think I'm already kind of lean. I don't know if you noticed that about me or not, but it's funny. The first time I ever spoke in Ireland, I've been there several times. First time I spoke, I had some friends there that run a vegan B&B, and they set some events up for me. I'm in County Cork, speaking in the town of Cork. And the next morning, my friend she said, Lauren, several of my friends were there last night, and they were really impressed. And I'm going, yeah? And she said, yeah, they've never seen a guy with a waist before, instead of a big belly. Oh, that's what they were impressed by. That's great. So my body was able to completely eliminate this toxin within a week. And I thought, I don't want to go even thinner than normal to give these lectures, right? Okay, so does that answer your question?
Yeah, and
You still remember your question?
Yeah, no, I'm curious, how long does it take when you put the other back on? Or is it ever? Is it because it's cleaned out?
Well, it depends. It depends on where somebody is. The thing is, you see, in San Diego, I have a client. A couple of years ago, I had 2 women come to me, a mother and daughter. The daughter was 20, mom was 45. Mom, healthy runner, tennis player. She was in good shape. Her daughter, at 20, never used her body at all. She grew up in front of screens, right? Video games, computer screens, television screens. She never did anything. And she was a very lovely young woman. She looked good, but she actually was the definition. There's a term that was coined a few years ago called skinny fat people. What's that? Well, these are people that have way too much body fat, although they don't look like it. They look skinny. Well, how can that happen? It happens when there's no muscle. See, the only way you're going to build healthy weight is to put on muscle. You don't want more fat, you want muscle. That takes work, and it takes some time. So it depends on where everybody is. But the other thing you want to understand is that, and by the way, I abhor animal studies. I don't think we have the right to experiment. I'm a vegan for 20 plus years. I don't own leather. This is not leather. I don't have any. I don't use silk. I don't use wool. Okay, I don't believe in using animals for anything. I don't believe it's my right to use or harm any other species. I believe in ahimsa, which means harmlessness. So I do my best. But because these studies exist, I'm going to quote them for you because they're compelling. So in over 100 studies with different species, with the exception of Arctic species, if you live at the North Pole, if you're a polar bear or whatever, you need fat to keep warm. With the exception of those species, in virtually every case, the healthiest members of every species tend to be the leanest members. You see, in nature, animals sometimes have to have reserves. You and I don't need a lot of reserves. Is there anybody here that can't get themselves to food 24 hours a day? Probably within 10 minutes of your house, there's like a dozen places open all night long, if your kitchen wasn't already stocked. So it doesn't benefit us in any way to be carrying more reserves than necessary. But most people are carrying at least twice as much body fat as they need to have. So some people think, and again, people think, right? This is a problem. From up here, should be my ideal weight. I tell people, throw your scale away. We'll weigh you at the center because we want to see your progress. But when you go home, forget about that. Why does it matter what you weigh? What matters is how you feel. Right? So forget, that's from up here, what I think I should weigh. Forget about that. Okay? Yes, sir.
I was wondering how much water you drink on a fast. And I'd also like to know how you know you're being cleansed.
Well, you're being cleansed. He asked me 2 questions. How much water should you drink on a fast? How much water do I drink? How much water does the average person drink?
How are you?
Okay. And how do you know you're being cleansed? You know you're being cleansed because, A, you smell it, you feel it, and you know the difference afterwards. So Jeff knew he was being cleansed, the photographer, because he could smell the stuff in his urine. And this is common, right? People who have smoked for a long time, even if they've already been off cigarettes for a while, they'll usually smell like nicotine. It's coming out of their skin. We smell this stuff, right? It's amazing what the body does. And the body will store these things for a long time. Let me tell you a very quick story. It's a long story. I'm going to give you the quick piece of it. I fasted a young woman for 6 weeks. And at the end of the fast, I fasted, by the way, more than 120 people for 6 weeks or more. The longest fast just short of 10 weeks. The average person has a 6 to 8 week reserve. Even most of these people fasting 6 weeks were not overweight. Now, why would anyone do that? Because they want to get as clean as possible. So, it's not for everybody. Tell me your name again, young lady. Nicole. Nicole's pretty lean. If you fasted for 6 weeks, you would look like you were walking out of a concentration camp at the end of that. And you might not want to deal with, all the energy around that when you get back, because it could take you 2 or 3 months to look healthy again by most people's standards, right? So, it's not necessarily for everyone, but people do this all the time because they want to get as healthy as possible. This young woman, when she started her fast, was 110 pounds, 5'4". She was stunning. I had a very successful author at the center at the same time fasting. A woman who was going to write a book about her fasting experience, and she didn't. But that was the plan. And she was blogging every day. And the second day of her blog, she said, Megan, this woman, is the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. I mean, I just want you to know, she looked amazing, right? Maybe I should give you a little bit more of the story. She actually came to the center 7 months earlier, as an intern. And it was an unusual situation. We had just moved to Panama 7 years ago. Normally the interns fast first. In this particular case, I needed them to fast after the program was over. And they agreed to that up front. But by the time the program was over, she had decided she wanted to fast longer. So we agreed that she would do a second program with me and then do a 6-week fast instead of a 3-week fast. Okay? So when she first arrived, she was 152 pounds. And she had terrible body odor and terribly strong breath because she was so toxic. Now, 7 months later, when she starts her fast, she's 110 pounds. She looks amazing. She doesn't smell bad at all. And, you wouldn't know there's any issue. But she goes through this 6-week process, and it's fairly typical, and she gets so tiny and so weak, like I was just saying. She looked really scary to most people. But she wanted to get clean because she was doing this because she had been severely constipated since she was 7 or 8 years old, always. And she was 26 or so at the time. So it had been 18, 19 years, severe constipation. She completes the fast. 3 to 5 days into refeeding, most people start eliminating again. Now we start feeding people in very small amounts of food, and so they don't feel hungry. I mean, they don't eliminate because there's not much there. If you eat, the first day, if you eat 10 ounces of watermelon, and 95% of that's water, there's not much solid material in there to occasion a bowel movement, right? So it can take a few days. She starts eliminating. On about the third day of eliminating, she starts eliminating a lot. I mean, at first people have a bowel movement, and then she starts to have 7, 8, 10, 11 bowel movements, large bowel movements every day.
Wow.
This went on for about 10 days. I mean, this is a woman who was beautiful and tiny by the time she started her fast. You'd be thinking, where could she possibly be keeping 20 pounds of old crap? But it was in there. It was in there. And what was amazing, though, was when this first day she started eliminating a lot, she started speaking really fast. And the second day, she started speaking really fast, and her eyes started bulging out of her head. Now, if you've ever seen anybody with hyperthyroidism, overactive thyroid, right? But I'd known her for at that point for 8.5 months. I knew she didn't have a thyroid problem. You don't create problems by fasting, because fasting is giving the body a chance to heal. I knew that wasn't that. I'm thinking, where else have I seen this? I'd seen it before in people who were fasting because they wanted to end an addiction to pure speed or cocaine. As the body is dumping lots of these stimulants into the bloodstream, it's all revved up. And so the second day she's talking even faster, her pulse is real rapid, her eyes are bulging out of her head, and I said to her, did you ever use cocaine or speed? And she said, yes. When I was in high school 8 years ago, I smoked crack twice. Crack cocaine twice. I said, I think this is crack cocaine coming out of your body. It seemed strange that she'd fasted 6 weeks, it had been another week, 7 weeks, 7 months on this amazing diet. 7 weeks into this fast, she's only now starting to eliminate this stuff. Well, the next day, when I went to see her, she said, Lauren, I think you're right. it's crack. I said, why do you think so? She said, because when I smoked crack 8 or 9 years ago, I got a chemical burn inside my mouth. I burned inside my mouth. I woke up this morning, I had the exact same burn in my mouth all these years later. Okay, it took about 2 weeks for this burn to heal, this burn tissue to heal, right? Then I did some research. Guess what I found out? Guess where we tend to store cocaine in the body? In the colon. Her colon was impacted with all this old fecal matter. As her body started eliminating this stuff, the cocaine was liberated again. Okay, so, you know, and she got it all out of her system. It was an amazing thing for her. So, that was the question.
That was about, yeah, how
That's
you
the
know
answer I ever got.
How do you know you're cleansing? That's how you know you're cleansing. How much
water.
how much water? So the average person, everyone's different, but the average person needs between 8 and 12-ounce glasses a day. That's average. Okay?
Sipping it?
Sipping it. It's a big deal. That's your primary, you know, you rest and you sip water. That's your job. And you want to rest as completely as you can. I have a man who, how many of you have heard of Beck?
Yeah.
Multi-platinum, like 7, 10 platinum. Well, I have a client who was in his band for 6 or 7 years, was on 5 platinum albums. And I met him, in fact, the last time I was on lecture tour in Southern California was almost 10 years ago. I'm glad you're here because it could be a while again. I have limited time to do this, and lots of places I'd like to be sharing this material. But I met him on that trip, and he subsequently, and he went home with the whole package of information, right? And, you know, because he wanted to do, he had had severe acne, not like most of us, you know, at 14 or 15. For him, 21. And, you know, terrible time, even worse, right? Even harder to have this terrible problem at that age. His doctor put him on Accutane. You familiar with this stuff? This is a nasty drug. Completely destroys your immune system. His condition was so bad and so resistant, they had him on 3 times what's considered the maximum dosage. And completely destroys the immune system. So by the time I meet him, he's in his 30s, and he's still not healthy at all kinds of issues. But he starts doing everything I said him to do in the program. He finally, 2 to 3 years later, comes to fast. Does really well, goes home, makes perfect choices. Every year, we're doing phone coaching, at least once or twice, where he's making sure he's doing everything as well as he can. By the 3rd time he fasted with me, he was drinking 1 to 2 glasses of water per day because he came in hydrated. When I fasted back in July after the snake bit me, only for a week, I drank 1 or 2 glasses of water per day. Much more than I usually drink, but much less than most people need to drink. Okay, because I was already pretty hydrated. Very hydrated. Okay. Yeah.
What kind of water?
We use reverse osmosis water.
That removes the fluoride, reverse osmosis.
Say again?
The fluoride in the water? Fluoride?
Yes.
What about water that's been structured in blue bottles in the sun? Come on.
Which color blue are you talking about?
Cobalt.
Yeah, royal blue is better.
No, this is funny.
You made me forget my question with that one. What about colonics to clean out the colon while you're fasting?
Yeah, we don't do it.
So the toxins are in there.
You know what? Because we're getting toward the end of our time now. It's 9 o'clock, and I know most of you thought it was going to go till 9 o'clock, and so it will, more or less. So here's what I'm going to suggest you do. Go to my website. It's a little confusing. I apologize. We're going to redo it again soon. But if you go to the resources section, put your mouse there, your cursor there. There'll be a little drop-down menu, and it'll say articles and interviews, I think. Click on that. And you'll see an article I published maybe 12 or 15 years ago called A New Look at Colon Hydrotherapy. And it'll explain in much more detail than I can do in a couple minutes right now why we don't use them. Okay? We get amazing results every time, and there's no need for them. And they're flushing out beneficial bacteria, they're changing the pH of your colon, they're weakening the muscle. There's no reason to do it. Yes, sir.
Is there any way possible to fast without resting, or resting minimally?
No. I mean, you could do that, but you'll actually be hurting yourself. Because what will happen is, A, your body will have very little energy. Remember, you're taking in no fuel, but you're living your normal life. Your body has no energy for cleansing or healing. And you wind up consuming muscle in order to get what you need. So it's really completely counterproductive. If you can't take the time out of your life, and I mean, I understand that can be difficult for some people. It's difficult for almost everybody. When someone says to me, I can't fast, what I usually say is, I think what you mean is, right now it's not a high enough priority. And I respect that. Everyone needs to make their own choices.
Are there alternatives?
Well, that's a good one.
Eating a better diet in the
Yeah, I
meantime.
mean, what you can do. So, not only can you eat a better diet, but you could, for instance, you could eat nothing but juicy fruit for 3 weeks.
How about
Because-
double milk?
Oh, what? Double it doesn't work. Gotta be juicy fruit. That's good.
So what can you do?
You're hired. What's that?
What can you do? Read?
Close your eyes.
No, well, you want to do as little as possible.
Okay.
You block?
You want to do as little as you possibly can, because when your eyes are open, the visual cortex is the largest part of your brain. When your eyes are open, you've got 60,000 bits of information hitting your brain every second. Okay? If your eyes are open, you are not resting. You lay down and close your eyes, and your heart rate, respiratory rate, brain waves all slow down and normalize. That's how you get into the most restful state possible. That's how you get the most benefit. You can do whatever you want. I mean, I've got people that sit and talk the whole time. They don't get nearly as much benefit as they could. So what I would encourage you to do would be, eat watermelon, and each meal, one thing at a time. But you could be watermelon, could be cantaloupe, could be citrus. You've got beautiful citrus here. Juicy fruits, right? High water content, the easiest things you can possibly digest, easiest whole foods to digest, which means the least amount of energy is tied up in processing food.
And water?
Well, sure. Yeah, you'll need to keep drinking water. I mean, everyone here is probably dehydrated and needs to drink a fair amount of water. You sip the water and don't eat any more than you need to, right? Don't starve yourself. Meet your needs if you're going to be busy. But that's the best thing you can do besides fasting. Far superior to drinking juices. I do not encourage anyone to juice fast. I believe it's counterproductive. You're actually training your body to become less efficient. The law of efficiency. How many of you wear glasses? Lenses? Anything? Okay. How many of you have seen your eyesight improve since you started wearing glasses? It doesn't happen very often. Why not? Because the law of efficiency says it's not going to. It's more efficient for your body to let your glasses do the work. So your eyesight gets worse. Okay? Remember I told you before, if you have a deficiency, there's only two possible reasons. Insufficient diet, inability to assimilate what you're taking in. If you're not dealing with the cause of the problem, but instead forcing massive amounts of nutrients into your body, and I was doing a talk like this a few years ago outside of Washington, D.C. A woman came up to me afterwards to talk to me. She wanted my autograph. And I said to her, you drink a lot of carrot juice, don't you? And she said, how'd you know? I said, because you're orange.
Yeah.
And she said, oh, that's because I'm detoxifying. So I said, I don't know. I mean, I've only taken like 1,500 people through a 24, 25-day average water-only fast. None of them have ever turned orange. Okay? Detoxifying has nothing to do with turning orange. In fact, what's true is that she was consuming a toxic amount of carotenes. So much so that her body couldn't process them through the liver, had to push them through the skin. This doesn't make sense. Think about this. When you drink juices, you're consuming 3, 4, 5, 10 times more nutrients at one time than you would in a regular meal, in a normal meal. How's that beneficial? Your body has to work to process every single thing you consume. We're designed like every other species to get our nutrients from our food. Now, when I came in today, you guys can attest, I have a big bag. Actually, I had a small bag inside the big bag. But I have a big bag, a small bag, and a briefcase. Right? I used to travel the same way 20 years ago. Except that in the big bag would be my champion juicer, 25 pounds of carrots and 25 pounds of apples. Those are the easiest things to travel with in terms of for juicing. I was juicing several times a day. I was spending a fortune in time and money, this is good news. Why are the long faces? Get your body clean, learn how to eat right. You know, the truth is, if you're relying on juices and smoothies and supplements and practitioners, I mean, you know, I'm thinking, I know everyone's different, I don't want to make any generalizations. I know this is a relatively affluent area. We charge $3,000 for 4 weeks. But it's the single most powerful, important thing you can ever do for yourself. And over the rest of your life, over the next 50 or 60 or 100 years of your life, you'll easily save many times that much. Remember, I've never paid a medical bill in well over 20 years. I don't take any supplements, any smoothies, any juices, any superfoods, and I eat a tiny amount of food. Because the machine that we use also will tell you what your basal and daily metabolic rate should be based on what it's measuring, your muscle mass and fat, age, etc., based on statistical data. So it says, to me, almost 150 pounds, 6 feet tall, 51 years old, you know, etc., etc., 6% fat. I should be consuming just under 3,000 calories a day, which isn't a lot. The average average male in this country today consumes 3,500 calories a day. Way. Okay? But on an average day, I don't consume 50% of what the machine says I should need. That's what we want to get to. We want to become as efficient as we can. You know, everyone's telling you how you can increase your metabolism. You know what increasing your metabolism means? It means you're less efficient. People like this idea because it means they can eat more food without gaining weight. But look, if you're eating 2,000 calories a day now, you increase your metabolism, what that means is to maintain your weight, you'll need 3,000 calories. If processing food through your body takes more energy than anything else you do, what that means is you will age and die faster. This doesn't help you. You want to do the opposite. All the studies show you take an animal, cut its caloric intake in half, on average, they've lived twice as long. Biosphere 2 in Arizona desert 30 years ago, 40 years ago. A group of scientists went to the project. It was a completely enclosed ecosystem. Nothing came in, nothing went out after the scientists went in there. They lived in there for 2 or 3 years. They were going to grow all their own food. But they way overestimated how much food they'd be able to grow. So they were only eating 67% as many calories as they thought they would. What happened? They were all measurably healthier in every way by the end of the experiment. The only thing that's been proven to extend human life, lower caloric intake. But see, I met one of the doctor on that team, I can't remember his name, spent the rest of his life, he died a few years ago, he spent the rest of his life traveling around the world telling people to restrict their caloric intake. Restrict your caloric intake, right? So I was at a health conference and met some of his followers. I said, how do you feel? They said, hungry. Because they were restricting themselves. I don't believe in restricting anything. What you want to do is get efficient. So you're meeting your body's desire for food. It's just a lot lower than it was before. Make sense?
So if you're thirsty at night before you go to bed, eat an orange, or don't eat anything?
Don't eat anything. Yeah, if you're thirsty before you go to bed, take a little sip of water. You know, what you want to do is get all the water into your body from the time you wake up until like 3 hours before you go to bed. Because if you drink a glass of water before you go to bed, you will be up to pee 3 or 4 hours later. Okay, and your sleep is much less restful if you're waking up to pee.
What do you eat?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask that. What do you eat?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Second? Well, a typical day for me might be a papaya like this, small watermelon, 5 or 6 bananas.
Are you fructitarian?
Every human being physiologically is a frugivore. Fruitarian is not a scientific term, but like every other anthropoid primate, we are frugivore, except the mountain gorilla. It's primarily leaves. They're foliivores. We are all frugivores. Our bodies are almost exactly the same as the chimps and the bonobos, for instance, who eat almost exclusively fruit. I eat almost exclusively fruit, some salad, simple green salads, almost never anything else.
It's Snickers bar?
Oh, sure, no, like 2 dozen of those a day.
Just one last,
Okay, we'll come back to you.
I really appreciate you being here, and I really.
I appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
I came because we said,
Thank you. I'm.
Nicole's gonna be there. I said, I'm coming.
It really feels right, you know, as you're describing this, it feels right. But I wanted the whole fruit piece, if someone is not clean, you
Yeah.
know, and just in my own experience, and then also just hearing recently, you know, the statistics, but there's such a huge population that is like pre-diabetic, they don't even know it.
Right.
So how do you still recommend fruit for people
I
who
do.
aren't clean?
I do, yeah, and most people don't have any problem. You know, and unfortunately, it's so not clear, like what's out there, the information that's out there. How many of you are familiar with glycemic index? Everyone's heard this term, right? Watermelon has a high glycemic index. So if you're pre-diabetic, stay away from it, right? Right? No. Glycemic index tells you how quickly the food, the watermelon in this case, gives up its carbohydrate. How quickly it gives it up. But it doesn't say anything about the impact of that substance on your blood sugar. That's glycemic load. And watermelon has a very low glycemic load. Who's familiar with that? That's what I thought. Not too many. So, see, there's all this confusion because there are people out there that want you to be confused. Very few people are going to have a problem because when you eat fruit, the fiber in the fruit slows down the absorption of sugar in your bloodstream. You drink carrot juice, or beet juice, or fruit juice, blood sugar skyrockets because there's no fiber. Lots of sugar, no fiber. Okay, you eat bread, you eat white bread. White bread has a high glycemic index and a high glycemic load because all that starch is converted into what? Sugar. All complex carbohydrates broken down to simple carbohydrate, which is sugar. And it all hits your bloodstream and there's no fiber, and so your blood sugar goes way up. It might take 3 hours. Most people that have hypoglycemia are in fact dealing with a cycle several times a day that they're creating by consuming things that push blood sugar up. Thanks again, Chris. Good night. See you tomorrow or later. Okay. Make sense? Then there's more. You know, if you have specific questions, if you have a simple question, feel free to email me. Please consider the possibility of, you know, if you have a lot, if you need help, maybe schedule a consultation with me. Okay? You had a question, Rita.
it might not be so simple, but you know, when you're lying there closing your eyes,
Yeah.
how do you deal with the thoughts that are, I mean, that's when thoughts come up.
Drama.
Well, you're actually asking a really important question. Who here has ever gotten bored? Anyone get bored? You know, the reason we get bored, the reason, like, call a friend and say, what are you doing? And they say nothing. Do you believe them?
No.
No. No one's doing nothing. Why not? Well, most people have to do something to distract themselves from the emotions that come up when we do nothing. But the problem is that as long as we keep those emotions suppressed, they're negatively impacting us. So the best thing you can do is lie there and allow those things to come up and feel them and release them. And it's an amazingly powerful process. The truth is, it's like the most important piece. You know, all the physical toxicity, yeah, that's important too. But 97% of what happens, what we create and what we're making happen in our lives is based on our subconscious programming. And our suppressed emotions are affecting that all the time. So we want to allow this stuff to come up and deal with it. And then we can actually become balanced in a real way, which can never happen otherwise. Okay? If anybody would like a free consultation tomorrow and can pick me up and drive me to Escondido, you've got it. Anybody? Anybody
I
available?
have to drive down to San Diego.
What time?
I have to check, I have a meeting, what time do you get there?
I'm speaking tomorrow evening.
Okay.
If you can get me to Oceanside in time to catch a bus to Escondido, it'd be perfect.
I can, do you text, or can I call you?
Yeah.
I'll check my email.
Yeah. I'll get you my number before you go.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, I don't remember it.
You could also rent a car, you know, they're pretty cheap.
I'd rather,
Yeah, I have to drive.
I'd rather talk to Nicole, because she's got cool shoes.
I've got the same shoes.
Yeah.
My pleasure. It's a pleasure. Thanks everybody for being here.
Yeah, thank you.